Remember, readers, you not only see and hear and imagine as if you're in the story, making your movie in your mind, but you also revise the ideas that you have about the characters in the story. And remember, those little changes that you make, those little revisions, they kind of like nudge you to think, oops, I'm going to have to change what I was thinking about that. Now here's how I do it. I have another example for you. Way back at the end of chapter 2 in The Tiger Rising. Now this is when Norton and Billy Threemonger were bullying Rob in the back. And you remember, the bus driver, Mr. Nelson, he didn't pay that any mind. He just let it happen. Anyway, Sistine, she came onto the bus. The bus stopped, the door opened, she walked on, and while Norton and Billy and Rob watched, open-mouthed and silent, a girl with yellow hair and a pink lacy dress walked up the steps and onto the bus. And I can picture her doing that. I can picture her walking up in a little pink dress, golden hair. And my image of her was that. That's what I thought of when I thought of Sistine. But then it changed dramatically, because in the next chapter, she's at school, and in chapter 4, she stands up in front of the class, and the teacher, Mrs. Soames, says, "Why don't you introduce yourself, Sistine?" And she says, "My name is Sistine Bailey. I'm from Philadelphia, and I hate the South because the people in it are ignorant. And I'm not staying here in Lister. My father's coming to get me next week." And she looked around the room defiantly. And I can picture that. I can picture the classroom. And she's new. So she's standing up in front of everybody, and she's looking out at a sea of new faces. And if I were her, I'd be feeling pretty nervous. But then she goes out and she says those things. That is a change from when I thought of her at first. This little blonde-haired girl in a pink lacy dress. Nobody that I know talks like that, wearing a pink lacy dress and blonde hair. Or at least I didn't think so. You see, I changed my thinking. I revised what I thought of about her. And of course, now we're well into the book. So we know a lot about her. We know how tough she can be. Let's read on and find out more about how characters change. Chapter 8. His father read the note from the principal slowly, putting his big finger under the words as if they were bugs he was trying to keep still. When he was finally done, he laid the letter on the table and rubbed his eyes with his fingers and sighed. The rain beat a sad rhythm on the roof of the motel. "That stuff ain't nothing anybody else can catch," his father said. "I know it," Rob told him. "I already told that to the principal once before. I called up there and told him that." "Yes, sir," said Rob. His father sighed. He stopped rubbing his eyes and looked up at Rob. "You want to stay home?" he asked. Rob nodded. His father sighed again. "Maybe I'll make an appointment. Get one of them doctors to write down that what you got ain't catching. All right?" "Yes, sir," said Rob. "But I won't do it for a few days. I'll give you some time off." "That would be all right," said Rob. "You got to fight them, you know. Them boys. I know you don't want to, but you got to fight them, else they won't ever leave you alone." Rob nodded. He saw Sistine twirling and punching and kicking, and the vision made him smile. "In the meantime, you can help me out around here," his father said. "Do some of the maintenance man work at the motel. Do some sweeping and cleaning for me. Beauchamp's running me ragged. There ain't enough hours in the day to do everything that man wants done. Now go on and hand me that medicine." His father slathered and slapped the fishy-smelling ointment on Rob's legs, and Rob concentrated on holding still. "Do you think Beauchamp is the richest man in the world?" his father asked. "No," his father said. Do you think he's the richest man in the world?" he asked his father. "Nah," his father said. "He don't own but this one itty-bitty motel now. And the woods. He just likes to pretend he's rich is all." "Why?" "No, I was just wondering," said Rob. He was thinking about the tiger pacing back and forth in that cage. He was certain that the tiger belonged to Beauchamp. And wouldn't you have to be the richest man in the world to own a tiger? Rob wanted desperately to go see the tiger again, but he was afraid that he had imagined the whole thing. He was afraid that the tiger might have disappeared with the morning mist. "Can I go outside?" Rob asked when his father was done. "Nah," his father said. "I don't want that medicine rained off you. It costs too much." Rob was relieved, almost, that he had to stay inside. What if he went looking for the tiger and he was not there? Rob's father cooked them macaroni and cheese for supper on the 2-burner hot plate they kept on the table next to the TV. He boiled the macaroni too long, and a lot of it stuck to the pan, so there weren't many noodles to go with the powdery cheese. "Someday," he told Rob, "you and me will have a house with a real stove, and I'll do some good cooking then." "This is good," Rob lied. "You eat all you want. I ain't that hungry," his father told him. After supper, his father fell asleep in the recliner, with his head thrown back and his mouth open. He snored, and his big feet, big with crooked toes, jerked and trembled. In between the snores, his stomach growled long and loud, as if he was the hungriest man in the world. Rob sat on his bed and started to work on carving the tiger. He had a good piece of maple, and his knife was sharp, and in his mind he could see the tiger clearly. But something different came out of the wood. It wasn't a tiger at all. It was a person, with a sharp nose and small eyes and skinny legs. It wasn't until he started working on the dress that Rob realized he was carving Sistine. He stopped for a minute and held the wood out in front of him and shook his head in wonder. It was just like his mother had always said. You could never tell what would come out of the wood. It did what it wanted, and you just followed. He stayed up late working on the carving, and when he finally fell asleep, he dreamed about the tiger. Only it wasn't in a cage. It was free and running through the woods in his dream, and there was something on its back, but Rob couldn't tell what it was. As the tiger got closer and closer, Rob saw that the thing was Sistine in her pink party dress. She was riding that tiger. In his dream, Rob waved to her, and she waved back at him. But she didn't stop. She and the tiger kept going, past Rob, deeper and deeper into the woods. Now, it's so useful making that movie in your mind, and I want you to practice that for your writing assignment for this chapter. And I want you to just pick a spot in this chapter, from this chapter, that was really so vivid that you could just see everything, that you just felt like you were there, or that you were Rob. Now, I have a few spots that I want to share with you, a few parts that I think would be great to write about. Here's one of them. Rob says to his dad, "That would be all right, to stay home and not go to school." Then his dad says, "You got to fight them, them boys. I know you don't want to, but you got to fight them, else they won't ever leave you alone." Then Rob nodded, and he saw Sistine in his mind, twirling and punching and kicking, and the vision made him smile. I could totally see Rob's dad talking to him about that. I could see the expression on his face. I could see the way Rob was looking like when he heard his dad say that. Another good part, that might be a good part to envision, is when his dad cooked the dinner. Doesn't sound very good for a kid to be eating stuff like this all the time. Rob's father cooked them macaroni and cheese for supper on the 2-burner hot plate they kept on the table next to the TV. Remember, they live in a hotel room. He boiled the macaroni too long, and a lot of it stuck to the pan, so there weren't many noodles to go with the powdery cheese. Now, we know that his dad loves him very much and cares about him, so he has something to cook with. That's great. Many people cook with a hot plate. But there's not very much food because his dad burns it and cooks it too long, and the noodles are all stuck together. I can totally picture that happening. I can totally picture, here's another good part, when his dad fell asleep and started snoring, and his big feet with crooked toes jerked and trembled as he was sleeping, just sticking out on the recliner seat. You know those recliners where you put your feet back like this? Write about whatever you saw when you were making the movie in your mind in this chapter. That's your job.